Welcome back to the Emily Show. This week we have quite a lot on the docket. So on the criminal docket, there are some really big updates in the case we talked about last week where Michael McKee was arrested for the murders of Spencer and Monique Tepe. And I had said I thought that he would be extradited by the end of the week. Well, that certainly didn't happen, but a lot else did. So today we're going to be covering the interview from the chief of police and a few questions where we learn new details about the case. And then most critically, there are yet new charges. So after the podcast last week, there was a court appearance on Tuesday. We covered that. There were new charges, and now there are even more new charges and a few other updates that are very interesting and quite important about what's happening with this case next. Then on the pop culture docket today, we have to take a look back at what's going on with the Scandoval lawsuits. And when I said lawsuits, it's because I mean lawsuits, plural. Remember, Rachel Leviss had sued Tom and Ariana, but Ariana had also sued Tom in a completely separate lawsuit. We're going to be updating those today. And then I have some thoughts about what was going on the couches for the reunion of the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, because there was a lot of talk about lawsuits being dismissed and if that's a win, and I mean, it's not a judgment. So we're going to have to just chat about that real quick. And of course, maybe we'll talk a little bit about traders, but don't worry if there's any spoilers, I'll give you a heads up. So let's get into it. I'm legal analyst Emily D. Baker. Yes, also a lawyer. And this is The Emily Show. I break down the pop culture, entertainment, and high profile cases that we're all talking about. I know you want the facts, so let's get into it. So in last week's podcast, we took a look at all that's new in the murders of Spencer and Monique Tepe. And that's because an arrest of Monique's ex-husband had happened, and we were pending a court hearing on Monday last week. I covered that hearing on stream. We will link it down below, but it was a hearing in Illinois regarding extradition to Ohio, where the murder occurred and where the charges are pending. And I thought, you know, hey, by the end of the week, we will have an extradition. Well, as of the recording of this episode over the weekend, the extradition still has not happened, and Michael McKee is still in custody in Illinois. So we are not going to see an arraignment just yet because Michael McKee has to be transported from Illinois to Ohio before he can be arraigned. Though at that first hearing, his attorney indicated that he thought what was best was to waive extradition, go to Ohio, enter a not guilty plea, and fight the charges there. And that's what we will see when this gets to arraignment. But we have a lot of new information about what happens next, because in the meantime, we had a interesting press conference that we're going to go to from the police chief of Columbus, Ohio, and the district attorney's office gave a statement because on Friday, they indicted Michael McKee. We're going to talk about all the charges in the indictments, the enhancements that are there, and where this case goes from here now that there's an indictment. Remember, I said, well, I think it was on stream. It might have been on the podcast too. We'll learn more about this case if it goes to preliminary hearing, unless we end up in a situation like the Koberger case where we were waiting for that information in a preliminary hearing, and then they turned around and indicted him, which is a secret proceeding, and then there's no preliminary hearing, and then the indictment serves as the probable cause. Yeah, that's where we're at with the indictment. But I have that document, I have the DA's statement, and we have that press conference. If you're new to the case, don't worry. The press conference gives a little bit of background on this case and the information as police know it. This press conference is from January 14th, 2026, ahead of the indictment that happened on Friday the 16th. So let's go to the press conference from last week with Chief of Police Bryant.
Just wanted to go over a little bit of the timeline. On December 30th, 2025, at approximately 10:04 a.m., Columbus Police Patrol officers were dispatched to the 1400 block of North 4th Street on a well-being check. Officers arrived at scene and located the 2 adult victims suffering from apparent gunshot wounds.
That was the second welfare check that we talked about, because the first one, they went to the wrong place and then they went back. That's the second one.
We now know that they were identified as Mr. Spencer Tepe and Mrs. Monique Tepe. Their 2 small children were also found in the residence physically unharmed. On January 10th, 2026, detectives filed warrants charging Michael D. McKee, 39, with 2 counts of murder in the deaths of Spencer and Monique Tepe.
There's more now.
Mr. McKee was arrested in Rockford, Illinois without incident. He's currently incarcerated in the Winnebago County Jail and awaiting extradition to Columbus.
As of today, he's still awaiting extradition to Columbus. It's going to take a minute, it seems, but he's still awaiting extradition.
We believe at this point, we have the person responsible for the murders of Monique and Spencer Tepe in custody, and that person is Michael McKee. This is still an active and ongoing investigation. Detectives are still going through evidence.
I really have to wonder if the grand jury was already contemplated at this time because they indicted 2 days later, or if it was ongoing at this time. I'm very curious about that timing.
Tips, and videos. We can't speak to all the specific details related to this case, so we don't want to jeopardize the ultimate goal of conviction. But what we can say, this was a targeted attack.
It's fair, and it's what we talked about in the other times I've covered this case. This was not a crime of opportunity. This was not a crime that happened subsequent or because somebody was interrupted in the act of another crime. This seemed, based on everything that we knew, to specifically target these victims.
This was a domestic violence related attack. As we know, McKee is the ex-husband of Monique Tepe.
And I wonder what digital
information we can say that we have the
have.
Suspect's vehicle on neighborhood video surveillance arriving just before the murders and leaving shortly after. Detectives were able to link this vehicle to McKee. The vehicle was located in Rockford, Illinois, and evidence was found that showed McKee in possession of the vehicle before and after the homicides.
Do you have video of him driving?
We can also say that multiple weapons were taken from the property of McKee, and there is a preliminary link from our NIBIN to one of the weapons that ties it to the homicides.
So what the chief of police is saying is that multiple weapons were recovered and there was a preliminary link between evidence on scene and one of those weapons through their firearm registration system, the NIBIN. So I imagine that's going to be casings and the weapon. That seems to be the most logical conclusion based on what we know. But there has been a preliminary link through their system to one of the weapons located, it sounds like, at the residence, and evidence from the scene, which is new information.
I want to say that our detectives work around the clock to be able to solve this case. But it's equally important to know that while this is gaining national attention, we work around the clock to solve all of our homicide cases. I'd like to bring the mayor up now to say a few words.
She's going to bring up the mayor, who thanks the department, thanks their inter-law enforcement partners, and thanks the public for the tips that they brought forward, thanks the public who brought forward video, and thanks the media for getting those tips out there. When law enforcement put out the video of the individual walking that we looked at last week, thanked the public for responding to that, and thanks the police force, and then talks about what a great job they do and how many homicides they solved last year, over 100, etc. So we're going to go to the questions now because, well, I'm interested to see what else we learn during the questions.
We'll take any questions at this time.
Chief, can you comment on a motive in this case? I mean, why did he allegedly kill Monique?
So it's a little harder to hear the media that's asking questions. Again, they're not mic'd. The mics are facing the speakers. I do have closed captioning up on the screen for the questions, but the media is asking, can you comment on a motive at this time? Have we ever seen that commented on at a preliminary press conference?
Spencer, and also leave the children alive.
At this time, we cannot comment on the motive. Again, part of the investigation.
Did you find any other evidence in this home in Lincoln Park?
What I can tell you is that we did search his property and we have evidence, but I can't speak to any specific evidence.
Can you tell us which police agency arrested him and where he was taken into custody in Rockford?
They're asking which agency arrested him and where he was taken into custody in Rockford. I mean, he's housed in Winnebago County.
Sure. This case is a great example of partnerships. So our partners with Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, ATF, federal agents, took him into custody
I didn't know who had taken him into custody. It's interesting to learn that ATF was involved in helping take him into custody. So there was some cooperation with federal versus local law enforcement. It's, again, just interesting. It might have been that they were the ones who were available to do it. So
close to his place of employment.
What can you tell us about?
And taken into custody close to his place of employment. Did they nab him coming out of the office? Like what? Emily, no speculation. I know, but now I'm curious.
McKee's whereabouts between the day of the crime and
Great
the
question.
day he was picked up?
Part of the investigation, unfortunately, as we talked about,
I would love to know that too. Was he going to work?
Specifics, but what we can tell you is that we have evidence that he was there during the time of the actual homicides.
You said there were no.
We can't tell you about his whereabouts between the time of the murders and afterwards, but we can tell you we know that he was in the area of the murders at the time of the murders.
Signs of forced entry. Are you able to say
Asking about signs of forced
how he
entry?
got into the house?
Unfortunately, we're not able to talk about that at this moment.
It is unfortunate. We would love to know.
Had interactions with the kids, or the kids may have seen.
The media is asking if there were any interactions between McKee and the kids or what the kids might have seen. They're not going to comment on that either.
Or heard anything at this point?
We don't have that information.
I hope they
Again,
saw
part of the
nothing.
investigation. There's just certain things we can't talk about.
I really just hope that they were asleep and did not hear or see anything. I'm going to maintain that hope.
Well,
Neighbors had said that they had seen McKee in the neighborhood and in front of the Tepe home days before the homicide.
What is that question? There's some new information there from the media. Neighbors said they saw McKee in and around the Tepe home in the days before the murder. I wonder if that's tips from the video that they put out. I'm interested to hear if that will be commented on or if that's just part of the investigation.
Can you confirm that?
at this time, we're unable to talk about specific information. But again,
From the
when we get
investigation.
additional information, we'll be more happy to share it to the public.
I know this is an ongoing investigation. I don't know if you can say this, but obviously they were divorced. Are you able to say anything about their relationship after that divorce? It was in 2017. Were they civil? I know he had a second wife as well.
Again,
What is being said or what's being asked is, do we have any information about the contact or nature of the relationship between Monique Tepe and Michael McKee after their 2017 divorce? And then the media asked, we know he had a second wife as well, which again is what I have thought as well from the court records that I looked at. Of course, it's possible that the records that I looked at are different records because we don't have every single docketed item to confirm, though I've seen numerous media sources reporting on the same thing, probably from the same information that I have as well, because that's the information that's on the court dockets. So I imagine that the response is going to be, what? This is an ongoing investigation. We can't comment on that, but we'll see.
there is, the investigation is still ongoing. Just understand, we're still collecting information. We're still going through a lot of evidence, and there's just some things
I'm
that
sure the
we
digital
can't
evidence
speak
is
to
vast
right now.
Can you talk about the extradition? Will you be going to Rockford and pick him up, and when will that happen?
I'll let you speak to that.
And this is
Sure.
one of the other,
We have policy related
one of the other, I imagine, sergeants or chiefs or captains coming up, Booker, who's talking about the extradition process.
to extraditions. Felony warrants out of state are primarily handled by extradition companies. And so the determination of whether or not it will be detectives from Columbus or an outside entity, likely an outside entity, but the logistics are being worked out as we speak.
Any idea when that will happen?
Y'all, they got Brian Koberger on a plane in like 5 hours. What are we doing? It's so much closer than getting someone from Pennsylvania to Idaho. How is this taking so long?
I don't know when that will happen.
What kind of weapons did you find in his home?
We can't speak to specific weapons, but
I have guesses on what kind of weapons they found on his home, but we're going to get to the indictment shortly, and we will have more information about that shortly.
we did recover multiple weapons from the home, from his property.
How quickly was McKee
At least one of them needed to be a firearm because it was matched in the firearm system preliminarily. So there's at least that. The next question sounds like, how quickly was McKee a suspect? I imagine once they found out she had an ex-husband.
suspect? I know that family told us they pretty much assumed that he was behind this crime.
What I can tell you is that every piece of evidence, every tip that we received, we immediately began to investigate it. So I can't give you a specific timeline, but any information that came in was immediately evaluated and investigated.
Are you able to say about how many tips you received? Obviously,
They're asking how many tips came in.
Do you know specific numbers?
We don't
She's looking to one of the
well, we
other
don't have
members of law enforcement.
an exact number of the amount of tips that came in because some of them were the same or similar. So it was numerous and it was from multiple sources, which is greatly appreciated from the community, the media, the past individuals that were knowledgeable and familiar with the family, and then the residents of the area, which ultimately led us to this day right now.
Can you believe that's landed in that window?
Sorry.
Some overlapping
I know
questions.
digital forensics and DNA play a big role in investigations these days, but it doesn't happen in 60 minutes with commercial breaks. Is there any sense of the timeline of when some of that information will become
They're asking about DNA and digital forensics.
available to you guys through that testing?
We're continuously looking for information, waiting for information. Unfortunately, we
time.
can't give you a specific timeline, but we're continuously working to get that information in.
The family mentioned that Monique previously said that he had been abusive towards her in the past. Was there any evidence or indication of that prior?
The media asked the chief of police that family said that Monique had said that her ex had been abusive. And I've seen articles clarifying that that was emotionally abusive and threatening, but they are asking if the chief of police has any comment on that.
To this incident?
What I can tell you is that we did not have any reports, or we did not have any information related to any type of incidents regarding
Which would be
the ex-husband
specifically
and
police
Monique.
reports.
Can you tell us if McKee and Mrs. Tepe had any contact leading up to this incident, months, weeks?
Any stalking concerns there?
Again,
The media is just now adding to one another's questions and asking if there were concerns of stalking, any contact, things like that, which again, I'm sure their investigation will turn up if it exists. But I don't know if we're there yet.
what we can share with you, we are sharing with you. There are some things that we can't share for investigative purposes, but what I can tell you again is that we didn't have any reports or anything linked to that specific location as it relates to the ex-husband and Monique Tepe.
Do you believe he's the person in the video that you shared, the person of interest?
We do.
Okay.
Well, that was a really straightforward answer. Appreciated. Do you think he was the person in the video? Yes, we do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's the end of the press conference with Columbus Police Chief and Columbus Police and the Mayor of Columbus just 2 days before Michael McKee was indicted, which is surprising to me because there were initial charges the day he was arrested. Then there were additional charges the following day, which took it essentially from a non-premeditated murder to a premeditated murder. We talked a lot about that on stream last week and the changing of which section he was charged under. And now we have a third set of new charges. These charges, of course, are going to supersede the first two complaints. And we're going to take a look because I have the documents, because that's what we do here. We love the documents. I have the indictment documents. So let's take a look together at this indictment. All right, we are looking at page 1 of the indictment from the Franklin County of Ohio Clerk of Courts, Common Pleas, from the 16th of January at 11:45 a.m. And it gives you what the indictment is for with a total of 5 counts. We're going to go through each of those counts. It's 2 counts of aggravated murder with specifications, aggravated burglary, and 2 counts of aggravated murder with specifications, different specifications. So essentially 2 counts of aggravated murder per victim with different circumstances or specifications that attach. And I will use aggravated murder and first-degree murder somewhat interchangeably just because of the language of where I practiced law for a very long time. In my brain, they are synonymous. So, grand jury term beginning January 9th, 2026. Remember, grand jurors can evaluate multiple cases during their term. That does not necessarily mean that this grand jury had been looking at evidence in this case for that long. Count 1 is aggravated murder under Code Section 290301A, which we looked at on stream last week. That is the premeditation. And you will see that in the language of the indictment here. It says the jurors of the grand jury of the state of Ohio, duly selected, impaneled, sworn, and charged to inquire of the crimes and offenses committed within the body of Franklin County, within the jurisdiction. This is older language, I am sure. In the state of Ohio, upon their oath, do find and present that Michael McKee, late of said county, yep, older legal words indeed, on or about December 30th, 2025, within the county of Franklin aforesaid, in violation of 290301A of the Ohio Revised Code, did purposefully and with prior calculation and design cause the death of Monique Tepe. And then we're going to talk about the two specifications that we see. That language, the prior calculation and design, is the premeditation language that you hear referred to thusly in other jurisdictions. But purposefully and with prior calculation and design is the language for Ohio. Specification to count 1, firearm specification, 3 years under the code section that they find that Michael McKee had a firearm on or about his person or under his control while committing the offense and used it to facilitate the offense. So personal use of a firearm. And then we have additional firearm specifications that carry an additional 6 years that say the grand jurors further find and specify that Michael McKee had a firearm that was equipped with a firearm muffler or suppressor on or about his person or under his control while committing the offense. So not only a personal use of a firearm allegation, but also a use of a muffler or suppressor allegation that would add 6 years to the charge. The code sections here cover a number of things. However, under the grand jury indictment, it specifies that a muffler or suppressor was used. So if you see people talking about it could be a automatic firearm or a this or a that, it's because the code section under 2941.144A carries a number of different and or, but we know it's specified in the language of the indictment that he personally used a firearm and that that firearm had a suppressor or muffler on it. And then we're going to look at count 2, which is the same language, same code section of aggravated murder related to Spencer Tepe, and the same 2 firearm specifications, the personal use of a firearm, and then that the firearm was equipped with a muffler or suppressor. Then we get to count 3, aggravated burglary. And that reads all of the jurisdictional language regarding the county, the state, and that Michael McKee, on or about December 30th, 2025, within the county of Franklin, aforesaid, in violation of 2911.11a of the Ohio Revised Code, did by force, stealth, or deception trespass as defined in 2911.21a1 of the code in an occupied structure or in a separately secured or separately occupied portion of an occupied structure when Spencer Tepe and or Monique Tepe, a person other than an accomplice, was present with the purpose to commit in the structure or in the separately secured or separately occupied portion of a structure any criminal offense. So, Emily, that's a lot of words. Yes, it's a burglary breaking into the house for the purpose of committing the murder. We saw a similar charge in the Koberger prosecution. It goes on to add that the offender inflicted physical harm on Spencer Tepe and or Monique Tepe and or the offender had a deadly weapon, to wit, a firearm, on or about his person or under his control. When this gets broken down into jury instructions, it's going to have the elements of entering a structure that was occupied and the entering being done by force, stealth, deception, and that they were inside the structure at the time, and that when he went into the structure, he inflicted physical harm on Spencer Tepe and Monique Tepe or because it'll be one of those two factors, had a deadly weapon, a firearm on his person. They also added the firearm allegations or the firearm specifications here for the 3 years of personally having the firearm and using it to facilitate the offense, and then having a muffler or suppressor on it. And then there are 2 additional counts of murder. Aggravated murder under section 290301B. Subsection B at the end of it says that Michael McKee did purposely cause the death of Monique Tepe while committing and or while fleeing immediately after committing the offense of aggravated burglary. So this is more in line with what we talked about on stream of a felony murder where somebody is committing a felony and then commits a murder in the commission of that felony. I don't think there's evidence here that the murder was committed while fleeing. That's just what the code section says. It seems that the burglary was being committed. This is an alternate theory. So the jury will either be allowed to pick either theory under subsection A or theory under subsection B, or they will be able to convict him of the theory under both subsection A and subsection B, and they will merge at the end of it and will be sentenced the same, because the sentencing on this, the maximum sentence is life without the possibility of parole, but it's 2 different theories with 2 different circumstances. And notice the language in the B section does not have that premeditation language. The language there is that he purposely caused the death, but it does not have that premeditation language of with prior calculation and design. So the factor that is bumping the B section into aggravated murder is that he purposely caused the death while committing and or while fleeing immediately after committing the offense of aggravated burglary. So the subsection A is premeditation. Subsection B is while committing or immediately after committing aggravated burglary. And those 2 sections, 1 for each victim, and then 2 identical firearm specifications. I'll also call them allegations, the 3-year and the 6-year firearm specifications. And that is signed by the foreperson. The signature is redacted. The prosecuting attorneys are on there. It is labeled as a true bill. And we saw again that was filed on January 16th at 11:45 a.m. There was also a brief statement made by the prosecutor's office that reiterated that Michael McKee had been indicted, stated what the charges were in the indictment, and then said, if convicted, McKee faces a minimum of life in prison with parole eligibility after 32 years and a maximum of life in prison without the possibility of parole. When the prosecutors are saying there is a potential for life with eligibility for parole after 32 years and a maximum of life without the possibility of parole, they did not list this as a case where the death penalty was the potential maximum sentence. And though in the code, it seems to indicate that this could be a case within their sentencing structure for the death penalty, even though there is a moratorium on imposing the death penalty in Ohio, it still seemed to be on the books based on the code sections that we pulled. I trust what the DA's office has to say, and they are saying the maximum is life without parole, or LWOP, and the minimum is life indeterminate with a minimum of 32 years served before eligibility for parole. I would be surprised if we don't hear more about that as we get into arraignment. So what happens next? Well, we're not going to see a preliminary hearing because there's an indictment here. So after arraignment, this case will start its pre-trial track, whatever that looks like. So I imagine we will not see a ton of hearings unless the defense chooses to fight for bail or bond, which, given the charges, given the potential maximum sentence, and given the fact that this is an out-of-state resident, it's very unlikely that a court would grant bail or bond or house arrest or anything like that, because A, he would have to cross state lines, and B, that would make it very complex to monitor. And I just don't see the path to a bail hearing, even if it's held, going positively for Michael McKee, given the circumstances as we know them now, which means this case will get arraigned whenever he's extradited. There's a hearing set in Illinois for January 23rd to check on the status of extradition, so the court can make sure that he's either been extradited or ask, when is he going to be extradited? Because why is he still here? So if Michael McKee is not in Ohio by Friday, the court is going to have a hearing to try to find out why. And I will keep an eye on that this week and see when the arraignment hearing in Ohio is going to be. And then we will have a little bit better idea of if the defense is setting any future court dates or when pretrial conferences will be set. And if the court is inclined, now that there's been an indictment, they could go ahead and start setting preliminary trial dates. Of course, we know that trial dates can move. So we will be keeping an eye on what happens next. I hope going through the indictment was helpful. You know what is part of the code, what is some new information about this case. And now we know more about not only the firearm involved, but that there was a muffler or suppressor on the firearm. So you might not have neighbors saying that they heard something. You might not have kids waking up, which I still hope to be the case. And it was an additional allegation as to those firearms, which leads me to believe that they found something that tied that back to either the suppressor or muffler. And we will see more about that in future court hearings, I'm sure. But for now, we need to move from the criminal docket to the pop culture docket. Leonard, we're going to take a quick moment to talk about something that makes my life a lot easier, and that's today's sponsor, HungryRoot. As a very ADHD person in a very ADHD household, eating is one of those things that takes tons of executive functioning. Finding something that takes the pain points out of getting healthy, nutritious, delicious food is a 10 out of 10 for me. HungryRoot has a ton of flexibility because you can order groceries or meals or a combination of the two. You can pick breakfast, lunch, or dinner. One of the things that we get delivered from HungryRoot every single time we order are the amazing vanilla protein pancakes, which Dr. B puts peanut butter on. I use them with eggs or sausage for breakfast and sometimes breakfast for lunch or dinner. If you are looking for something to make your life a lot easier or to feed everyone dinner, HungryRoot has options for you. And it all just gets delivered to your door. It's easy to track, it's easy to change delivery dates, and it's easy to pause when you need to. Leonard, I know you're going to love HungryRoot as much as I do. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box plus a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/Leonard and use code Leonard and get 40% off your first box plus a free item of your choice. I love that part. For life. Now let's get back to today's episode.
Mention it all. Mention it all.
I couldn't help myself because a lot of you found my live stream channel and this podcast when I was talking more about pop culture. And as time has gone on, I love live trials as much as you guys do. But unfortunately, a lot of the civil stuff is just not live. It's not streamed and it doesn't go to trial. So as we are covering live trials that everyone's talking about, and we've got some more court this week, don't worry. We sometimes get a little far away from the pop culture that I know I love, I know a lot of you love, and cases that we've been covering for quite a while. So today we are putting some items on the pop culture docket. Let me know if you want to see more items on the pop culture docket, either here on the podcast, on live stream, or a little bit of both, because I know I do. So as we are talking about what I have called the Scandoval lawsuits, it has been a while, like over a year, I think, since we have looked at these lawsuits. If you were like, Emily, what is a Scandoval? It's okay. You missed all of the past cast of Vanderpump Rules fallout with the Bravo, Bravo, ducking Bravo of it all. But at the fallout during the Bravo show Vanderpump Rules, the couple that we will be talking about is Tom and Ariana. Tom and Ariana had been together for 9 years, owned a home together, were living together, were working together, met while working and on the show. Tom had an affair with Rachel Leviss, who at the time was going by Raquel, but has since changed and started going by her given name, Rachel. So there might be some confusion there as well. The affair with Tom and Rachel came to light because Ariana saw a screen recording of what seemed to be a FaceTime between Tom and Rachel of an intimate nature. Rachel has since alleged that she didn't know that was being screen recorded and that Tom did not have permission to screen record it. That is the basis of the lawsuit where Rachel sued Tom and Ariana for a number of civil allegations, including invasion of privacy, revenge porn, and more, saying that Ariana shared that video. Ariana says, I took that recording off of Tom's phone and sent it to Rachel to say, WTF is this? We're friends and you're dead to me. And that not only played out on the show, but across pop culture. And Ariana, it seems, has since thrived. Tom was on Traitors. Rachel did a brief podcast, has done some interviews, and then, at least to my knowledge, been fairly out of the public eye, which is probably helpful after all of this went down. But that lawsuit is still pending. And when we covered this lawsuit, remember, there was a ton of information in this lawsuit filed by Brian Freeman and Mark Garrigus on behalf of Rachel Leviss. There was a ton of information that had nothing to do with the lawsuit. I was critical of it then too. Brian Friedman has since done that in other lawsuits that I was critical of as well. It's like, this is a lot of tea, but this has nothing to do with this lawsuit. Same. So we are taking a look at a docket item from June 2025, talking about the stipulation and order to vacate the trial date and related deadlines. And yes, on our last live stream, one of our members, Anthony, ACP, was asking, what's going on with Tom and Ariana? And it's funny because the update on the other lawsuit broke right after my last live stream. We just didn't have a chance to get to it. So we're going to talk about that in a moment too. Emily, this was supposed to go to trial. Yeah, there were like 3 dates it was supposed to go to trial. It didn't, but there's trial dates set now. What's helpful about the stipulation and status is that the lawyers tell us everything that's going on in the case. So we get a really good overview. They say plaintiff Rachel Leviss, defendant Ariana Madix, and defendant Thomas Sandoval, collectively the parties by and through their respective counsel of record, stipulate and agree as follows. Whereas this action was filed on February 29th, 2024, the trial in this matter is currently set for November 3rd, 2025, but on July 11th, the court denied Madix's special motion to strike under CCP 425-16, the anti-SLAPP. So Ariana had filed an anti-SLAPP motion. We talked about that a little bit. The court denied it, and Madix filed an appeal in the 2nd District. Her appeal is still pending. The opening brief was filed April 21st, 2025. Leviss filed her brief on May 21st, 2025. The reply brief was filed in June 2025. They say the anti-SLAPP appeal subjected the trial court proceedings, including discovery, to an automatic stay extending to all legal and factual issues at issue on appeal. That the legal and factual issues at issue on appeal are inextricably intertwined with plaintiff's case. They say as a result, the anti-SLAPP appeal has resulted in a de facto stay of plaintiff's case. The parties agree that this action will not be ready for trial by the current scheduled November 3rd, 2025 trial date. They agree that a continuance is necessary and appropriate. They believe the court should vacate all the deadlines and settings and set a date for a status conference, which was held in June. And the court agreed and set the future dates. So vacated the November 3rd trial date, set a trial setting conference for June 30th, 2025, and then set a new trial date that we're going to look at. In the meantime, Tom Sandoval switched lawyers, missed a deadline, got extension on a deadline, and Ariana's appeal is still pending. Let me know if you want to go into a very deeply nerdy conversation about anti-SLAPP, because there are some fairly large legal issues there, but I'm following it because I'm very interested to see what the Court of Appeal does. And maybe we'll just wait for the Court of Appeal ruling and then go over the ruling when it comes out. But Ariana is arguing that the court erred in a number of ways on the anti-SLAPP motion, including finding that this was not a matter of public concern and therefore anti-SLAPP didn't even apply to the issue of Ariana sharing the video to Rachel, among other things. So it would be a legal deep dive into anti-SLAPP, which we've covered a couple times. And California's anti-SLAPP is fairly strong. But if the court finds that the subject matter is not even in the appropriate realm for anti-SLAPP, then the entire anti-slap motion just gets booted out and the case goes forward. I'm curious to see what the Court of Appeals does, and we will talk about it more. There were some very interesting questions about a matter that would be personal, but for a reality television show. And does that make matters that would generally be considered personal, like sharing an intimate video, something that becomes more of a matter of public concern? Conversations that we can have another day. So Emily, when's the trial date? So after all of that, the Rachel versus Tom and Ariana went back to court in October 2025, and the court in a minute order stated as follows, that everyone conferred, the appeal is still pending. The appeal is complete, it's just out for decision. So it's just, we're waiting on the Second Circuit to decide. So the court notes that on the court's own motion, the trial setting conference scheduled for October 14th, the day they were in court, is continued until April 14th, 2026 in Department 71. That the attorneys, it shows at the top, appeared via Court Connect. So they were, essentially LA's version of Zoom. The court then ordered everyone to file a joint status report by April 7th, 2026. So Emily, when is this going to trial? Well, the thing about it being stayed from the anti-slap is that they haven't been able to undergo discovery. So depending on what happens with Ariana's appeal, it might be the end of 2026. It might be into 2027 because then they have to begin the discovery process. So even though the lawsuit has been moving through discovery as to Tom, it has not been moving through discovery as to Ariana. It's been stayed because of the appeal from really the beginning of the case. So once the appeal is ruled on, it really depends what happens and what the appellate court tells or doesn't tell the trial court to do. So this case is in limbo, and once the Second Circuit rules, we'll have a better idea of what's going to happen with Ariana's portion of the case. But you can't go to trial on, Rachel versus Tom if Ariana is still in the case. If Ariana is removed from the case, then it might be faster for Rachel versus Tom to go to trial because, well, the discovery's been ongoing as to Tom Sandoval. So that case is still pending. It hasn't gone away. I don't know if this is a case that we'll be able to just resolve, but we'll see what happens when that anti-slap appeal is ruled on, which, Emily, do you know? No idea. I have no idea. So it's just going to depend on when the Second Circuit gets to that ruling. But we do have another case with regard to Tom and Ariana that has resolved. Leonard, as we were talking a little bit at the end of today's episode about TV, just know that when I'm talking about all of those shows, I am also cuddled up under my Lola blanket watching them, and I'm so glad they are today's sponsor. One of the things I love most about Lola blankets is that they are machine washable. This one has been washed numerous times because it is always shared with at least Fred, sometimes George, sometimes both cats and Griffin. And truly, it does look as good coming out of the wash as it does going in, and it holds up amazingly. It is the softest blanket we have ever owned, and it is my go-to for gifts. And actually, the very first Lola blanket I ever owned was a gift to me. So not only is it one of my go-to gifts to give, but it is also a gift I love to receive. And not only does everyone at the Baker House love it, but Lola has over 10,000 5-star reviews. So if you're ready to try Lola blankets for yourself, for a limited time, our listeners get 40% off Lola blankets with code LAWNERD. So just head to lolablankets.com, use code LAWNERD at checkout, and get your 40% off. And if they ask how you found them, let them know it was The Emily Show. All right, let's get back to today's episode. Remember that I noted that Tom and Ariana had been partners for 9 years and owned a home together. Well, when I say they owned a home together, they owned a home together as 50% owners of the home. So each of them owned 50% of the home. But because they were partners and not married, there was no formal divorce that they were going to go through when they broke up. However, they're not going to still be living together, and they had not been able to resolve the issue of the house. So Ariana sued Tom to try to resolve the issue of the house. And this did play out a little bit on Vanderpump Rules. Tom talking about offering Ariana a reasonable amount for the house and wanting to stay in the house with Tom Schwartz and what have you. And Ariana had purchased another house at some point during all of this. But still, you have to resolve this in a fair and equitable way. And it seems that that's what's been done, because on January 13th, 2026, a notice of settlement of the entire case was filed, indicating that a conditional settlement had been reached and that the court is going to be able to dismiss the case no later than July 2026, because there are settlement agreement conditions that cannot be completed within 30 days of the notice of the settlement. Emily, what does that mean? It means that even though this case was filed in January of 2024, they have not been able to resolve it until now. And they finally reached a settlement, which I would imagine involves either the selling of the house or Tom buying out the house from Ariana and money changing hands to resolve this matter completely. It's indicated that that cannot be done in 30 days from the time that this was filed on January 13th. And therefore, the parties are telling the court, we've settled the case. We don't need to go to trial. We just need these conditions to be met, and then we can have it dismissed. But as a backup, they are proposing a final status conference February 5th, 2026, and a trial date of February 17th, 2026, in case those settlement conditions are not met. This is very common when a transfer of money needs to happen, because if that money doesn't transfer, then all bets are off and it goes to trial. So at least as to the home that they owned together, maybe they're selling it to one of the cast members on The Valley. Who knows? Maybe we'll see this home pop up on television again. But for now, it seems that either the sale of the property or one party purchasing the property from the other is what is going to happen to resolve this. It needs time to do that. But we'll know by February if that's been done or not, because they've got a status conference. So I'm going to be keeping an eye on this, because even though it's a notice of settlement, that settlement's not done yet. And what happens after a case settles? Well, then it will be dismissed, because that's what happens when cases get settled. Which brings me to Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. As we're talking about the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, no, we're not talking about Emily's BravoCon adventures. That's for members only. But when I was watching the first part of the season finale, which I always watch on Peacock because A, they don't bleep all the curse words and it's just natural. It takes me out of the moment when they are bleeping things out. I'm like, just let them say the words. But also they're a bit extended and there's no commercials. I absolutely love it. So I watch them on Peacock also, where my beloved Traders is for everyone watching Traders US. We in the Lawnerd Lounge have been doing kind of spoiler chats to chat along with what's going on Traders. And maybe we'll talk about that a little bit more here next week, because I don't want to spoil anything for you if you haven't gotten caught up. But I will say Traders has consistently for the last few years been the one show that I will sit down and watch the day that it airs. And this last week they dropped 2 episodes, and Travis had come down and sat with me and was like, wait, is Traders on? And I'm like, Traders is on, and sat down and watched episode 4 of Traders with me. And then when it got ready to go to episode 5, I'd be like, oh, they dropped 2 episodes. How did I forget that that was going to happen? I'm thrilled, but then I had to be reasonable and go to sleep so Travis and I could watch it the next day. But he has been enjoying watching Traders with me as well. It's one of the few shows that the entire family really enjoys watching, probably because the kids liken it to a game of Among Us. And every time Housewives is happening, Dr. B is like, why are they yelling? Where Traders has a little bit more of that survivor gamer element to it that he enjoys as well. So me though, when I was watching the finale of, well, part 1 of 3 of the reunion of Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, they were talking this season a bit about Lisa Barlow's lawsuits. Emily, have you gone looking for any of that? No, we've been in trial. Court is in session. We have been in trial in Massachusetts for like 3.5 years. So no, I didn't. But when Lisa and Bronwyn were talking about Lisa's lawsuits, Lisa's like, no, we won all of our lawsuits. They were dismissed. The most common reason things are dismissed is because of settlement, not because of a judgment. Because if there was a judgment, there would be a judgment. That means you win, unless they were completely dismissed as frivolous. But Bronwyn was saying, well, they were dismissed because you settled. These were lawsuits over business debt and you settled the lawsuits, and that's why they were dismissed, which is generally the reason lawsuits are dismissed. It is a very rare circumstance where somebody just like yeets themselves out of a lawsuit and is like, no, we're voluntarily dismissing it with prejudice. It is also rare that a court will entirely dismiss a lawsuit out of pocket. Remember with me, if you will, how long we have been talking about the TikTok psychic lawsuit out of Idaho. We have been talking about that lawsuit for years. The first time I covered that lawsuit, a lot of you were like, how can the court not just handle this? Like, just drop the hammer and let's go. Like, what? This is ridiculous. Yes. And it has still been years that it has been going through the court system. So to get to the point where a lawsuit is dismissed is incredibly unlikely short of settlement. And even in the TikTok psychic lawsuit that we've been covering, in that lawsuit, the plaintiff alleging defamation won a motion for summary judgment. And the court's like, yeah, you, TikToker, defamed plaintiff. And they still have a trial date set for next month. We'll see what happens with that. There's still a trial date set for next month on damages. So even though the issue of liability was won, the issue of damages still has to go forward to trial. We'll see about that one, because I'm not sure that the TikTok party is going to show up in Idaho to court. I imagine the professor is going to be there. Her lawyer is going to be there. But the self-represented TikToker, I don't know if they're going to show up. So we'll see what happens. I'll keep you posted. But when there's conversation about we won everything, it was dismissed. Dismissed is giving settlement. Dismissed is giving settlement much more than it is giving the court just went, rejected, get out of here, yeet. So the we won, they were dismissed. I guess you can call a settlement a win, but I think a settlement is a settlement and a judgment in your favor is a win. Let me know where you weigh in. Or am I being too lawyer picky on the words, or do you read it the same way? A settlement's a settlement and a judgment in your favor is a win. Curious to see what you guys think about it. Let me know if we need to talk about more pop culture. I don't know if I'm going to be able to not talk about traitors next week. It's just such good TV. And we're going to have to talk a little bit about some other things that are going on. But when we're covering so many cases that are heavy, and most of the cases that are televised and streamed are criminal cases, most of them are murder cases, I hope having an opportunity to talk about cases that are going on back in the pop culture sphere, the influencer sphere, the online sphere, will give us an opportunity to maybe talk about cases that, though very impactful to the parties involved, aren't always as heavy as the cases that we're covering in court. And with that, we will be in court a bit this week, so don't forget to get the Lawnerd app so that you are in the loop, because if you love some court coverage, we're going to do some court coverage. So many of you said, Emily, why aren't we in Virginia? Well, this week we're going to have to go to Virginia together. But remember, Lawnerds, we already have reservations to go to South Carolina at the beginning of February. So we can't be in Virginia too long. But yes, we are going to go to Virginia with Judge Ascarati, the judge that you know from the Depp v. Heard case, because in her courtroom with what seemed to be the worst microphones ever, but in her courtroom is a double murder case that a lot of you have been asking me about. The defendant, Banfield, is charged with the murder of his wife and a third party while he was having an affair with the au pair that was living in their home. And there's a lot more to that, but we will get into that on stream with some court coverage. So Lawnerd, I will see you in court. And again, thank you for being here. Thank you for being a Lawnerd. Don't forget to get the Lawnerd app and stay in the loop. And I will talk to you next time. Bye. Thanks for joining me. If you enjoyed this episode and don't want to miss updates on your favorite cases, you're going to need the Lawnerd app at lawnerdapp.com. That way you can stay in the loop on the cases that matter most to you, and You never know when you're going to catch feelings for a new case. So make sure you get it for free on iOS and Android. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being a Law Nerd.